We now welcome you into the show from Mizzou. I'm your host, Dan Herbener. Sitting to my right is my co-host, Colin Hossel, sometimes my colleague, sometimes my co-host. This week he's my co-host.
I'm glad to be your co-host, Dan.
Absolutely. Ohio State coming off a weekend with no football, but not without news as J.T. Barrett suspended for the Minnesota game. Also, the college football playoff rankings are out. We will get to them, some thoughts about them, where we think Ohio State stands, other things such as, I don't know, top four. Talk a little playoff.
We're also going to talk a little Ohio State, Minnesota after Ohio State managed to lose the bye week.
That they did.
The topic we're going to start off with.
That they did. Not ever a good thing, no matter where you're sitting in the polls or anything like that. Can't lose the bye week. But anyways, the reason why they lost the bye week is J.T. Barrett being suspended. He was cited for an OVI. It was very difficult. The details got really kind of clustered with everybody trying to break the information at once. From what I saw, he was cited for an OVI. Doesn't really matter. The fact of the matter is he's suspended for one game. He's losing his summer aid, so to speak, can earn it back.
And it does really matter, but we just don't want to get into that because
it's too gray. It's too much of a gray area,
and we could have
we
could have a 1 hour conversation about the ethics of it and whether Ohio State should have suspended him more, should have suspended him less. But they just did what the precedent was, and we're just going to talk about how this affects Ohio State this week and in the future. So let's start there. How does it? We're going to go back to Cardale Jones. The Cardale Jones show is back in town.
Well, I'd like to think that Ohio State is going to play well with Cardale Jones because I think the offense is going to be simplified. However, you look at this Ohio State team that's just been dealing with outside distractions ever since the end of last season. It's been, is Cardale going to stay? And now that Cardale is, who's the quarterback? And now are they a championship team? Is JT hurt? Is Braxton hurt? Who's the quarterback? Who's the quarterback? Should Cardale still be the quarterback? Should he still be the quarterback after this week? And now finally they had some stability with J.T. Barrett at quarterback. The offense looked like a juggernaut. But now you lose that, and you bring Cardale Jones in, and it becomes difficult because if he goes 20 of 25, throws for 290 and a couple of scores, is he your guy the rest of the season? I don't know. It's a difficult question to answer.
Well, if he did that a couple weeks ago, I think he still would be the guy.
No doubt about it.
Which is really interesting. It is an interesting question. And the whole time, the whole year since we've been doing the podcast, we've been talking about, well, every game matters along the way, but at the end of the day, unless Ohio State really messes up along the road, it's going to come down to Michigan State and Michigan, and it has. That's come true. And if J.T. Barrett did this 2 weeks after, if he did this after the Illinois game, man, it'd be a different story. But Ohio State is lucky that happened when it did, and the precedent is a 1-game suspension, and he's going to be suspended for Minnesota, and that sucks for Ohio State, but it is what it is.
I suppose so, and I guess it is lucky. So, or
yeah,
maybe
I know.
not
it's
lucky
weird.
that he's suspended for one game, and if he does come back, he'll get a game back before we get into the meat of Ohio State's schedule, which is only 2 games. But either way, if he does come back, which I do think he will, I think he'll be the quarterback come next week and beyond. But
the one thing I'm interested in for you is you said that you think Ohio State's going to simplify the offense for Cardale Jones, and that's fascinating to me because I'm not really sure that I see that happening because it hasn't happened.
It hasn't happened when?
This year.
Right, because Cardale Jones was the starting quarterback coming out of camp.
Yeah, and that's the offense that they chose to run with him, so why would they switch it up? I think we're going to see the same offense.
I don't think so. I think he lost his job for a reason, and I think the coaches made mistakes along the way through him being in too complex of an offense where he had to go through progressions and make these reads. I don't know if that's something that he couldn't have developed if the season went on, but I know that he wasn't at that point in time in his development as a quarterback, and I think that simplifying the offense for him would be the way that Ohio State's offense would be most successful.
For Ohio State's offense to be most successful, if that's what they did against Wisconsin, Alabama, and Oregon.
Best 3 games they played all year.
Then that's what I think they should do, but I'm not really sure that's what they will do, just because I don't think I haven't seen them do it this year, and I will be interested. We can just roll on and just say, I think that I don't think they'll simplify it. You do. But we know our positions, and I'm going to be interested to see what kind of offense Ohio State rolls.
I will be too, and I could be wrong. I've been wrong a lot on this podcast before,
we both have.
You might want to plan on me being wrong. But is your prediction that J.T. Barrett is the quarterback come next week?
Yes, and half of it though is because I don't know whether Urban Meyer will sort of do like a suspension type thing and have Cardale Jones start the game and have J.T. Barrett sort of come in, because it is going to be Illinois after the Minnesota game, and it's not exactly a game where you have to just unleash everyone. I think he might work him in slowly. So Michigan State, I think JT's the quarterback.
Right, I completely agree with you. I think that Urban Meyer has seen this offense sort of just go from decent
sputtering, really,
to this juggernaut,
yep.
which converts on third down, converts in the red zone. I just think JT Barrett has been so great for this offense. And it was a really big bummer. I don't know the guy, but what I heard from him, it's a very out of character mistake. But, you live with it and you move on from it. So anyways, getting into the college football rankings, the first rankings were released this past Tuesday night. Ohio State coming in third, Clemson 1, LSU 2, Alabama 4. Some thoughts about that across the country. Not really me, but is there anything that makes you really mad when you look at this poll? For me, there's not really.
I know both of us have this sort of opinion where it's just like, well, it'll play out eventually. But at the same time, I think it's really fascinating that the College Football Playoff Committee decided to do this release of the rankings every Tuesday, starting with about 60% through the season, because you get to actually figure out what they're thinking. And the thing that makes me angry, I wouldn't even say it's the thing that makes me angry. It's also the thing that I learned from the process, sort of remembered from last year. They really like to see you schedule good teams. They really like to see you schedule good teams. And that Alabama one-loss team right now, they'd be in over 4 other undefeated teams in the 6 through 9 space. And I think that's the thing that I learned. And I'm not sure if it makes me angry, but it makes me reconsider, really, because they're sort of like I get why Baylor's not in. They've played approximately 0 good teams, 0 even average teams. But it really makes me think about, people always talk about the SEC bias, and I don't really buy into that whole thing. Like, they're a really good conference. Maybe they have some bias towards there, maybe not. But it really makes me think.
Makes you think what?
Makes me think about the whole process. It makes me think about what they're looking for. I went to their website because I wanted to see what are we really ranking? Are we ranking the teams based on who the College Football Committee thinks is good? Are they thinking who deserves it? What are we really ranking? I don't really know, and they didn't really give me a good explanation, which is why I typed this out. It says the selection committee chooses the 4 teams in the playoff based on strength of schedule, head-to-head results against common opponents, and championships won, and other factors.
Other factors.
Yeah, other factors like what? They never specify, and that's why that's what makes me think.
It's always been a blend of best versus most deserving. There's always that battle in there, and I don't think you're ever going to land on the perfect combination, and I don't think you ever will, no matter how many teams it is. I really don't. I just think even the NCAA basketball tournament, 68 teams, and 69 and 70 are still complaining about how they think they should be in the tournament. So there's no number that you're going to get that's going to cause fans to just be okay with it. It's just not going to work that way. I look at this poll, and we talked about this before the show. We're talking about this before the show, Phil Simms stuff. But TCU a year ago was at 3, and Ohio State was 6. And then TCU won a game by about 50 points, and Ohio State won a game by about 50 points.
You're talking about going into the last week of the year.
Right. So don't you think TCU holds their position if they win at that point? And my explanation for why they didn't was these rankings are a snapshot of where we are at this point. It's not a projection by any stretch of the imagination. If it was a projection, then I bet Baylor and TCU would be a lot higher than maybe Alabama or LSU, because those teams are going to drop back because they play each other.
Yeah,
but since it's a snapshot, Baylor being 6, TCU being 8, they're going to play good teams. That's why you shouldn't get so worked up. And, I just don't get any worked up about any of this, to be honest with you.
So what makes you angry is people who are angry.
People being angry makes me angry. The only outward reaction you should have is just, oh, that's where my team is ranked. That's it. Because it's going to change a lot. And I made this analogy to you that there are 3 types of people. People who want to talk about teams' resumes, people who want to talk about the eye test, and people who want to talk about, we'll just sit back and wait. I'm a sit back and wait guy because everything will work itself out. Ohio State sitting at 3. You think that's okay? Correct?
That's the most reasonable thing in the world. They went to Virginia Tech and won, and they beat Penn State. And beyond that, are there any good teams that they've faced all year?
No, but if you look at the Virginia Tech game, that at least signifies an attempt to schedule a team that might have been good. When they were scheduled, they were at they were good.
Very true.
Right. So they've at least made an attempt. So that's why they're higher than a Baylor or TCU who didn't make any attempt to schedule a good team.
I also think they're higher because the eye test, Ohio State's looked really good, and they won the national championship last year. Ohio State should have nothing to worry about. If they win out, then they're going to be in.
I just think there's a level of common sense that you can have about these things. And if a team's good, it's like people complaining about Alabama being fourth. Why are you they have good wins, and that's a good team that has constantly been good over and over again. So why would you not give them the benefit of the doubt? It's just common sense. It doesn't make any sense to me why you'd think it'd be dumb to not give a team like an Alabama a benefit of the doubt. It just doesn't make any sense.
Very understandable.
I'm not angry about anything.
No, not at all. Your face is not red.
No, not in the least. But anyways, those are your college football playoff rankings, and
we're on to Minnesota.
Subject to change. On to Minnesota. We now welcome in Ben Goetz. He works as the sports editor for the Minnesota Daily. Ben, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, it's absolutely great whenever we can get a fellow student on to talk a little bit about our upcoming opponent. We're not Minnesota experts by any means necessary, but we did our research, so we'll do our best. Minnesota coming off a difficult loss against Michigan, as well as losing Jerry Kill for the future. He's gone now. Tracy Claeys takes over. What's the mood like around campus? Obviously a very, very tough loss, losing on a last-second play. Just, are they confident that they can compete in this game against Ohio State?
Yeah, absolutely. I think they are confident they can compete with Ohio State. I think the big thing pushing that is their close finish against the Buckeyes last year when they lost by only a touchdown at home. But it'll be interesting to see how they respond this week. Obviously, I think most people describe a very heartbreaking loss to Michigan this last weekend, losing on the final play, as well as losing your head coach earlier in the week. So we'll see how much their emotions can string out for a big test this weekend.
Yeah, and like Dan said, Tracy Claeys is going to be the interim coach right now. He's been with Jerry Kill since he was at Saginaw State. He was hired in 1995, so that is a really long time to be with the same guy. Do you think he has a future as the head coach of Minnesota, or is this just going to be on an interim basis?
I absolutely think Tracy Claeys will have a shot at the head coaching job. He will for sure be with the team for the rest of the year, and personally, I would be pretty surprised if they don't give him a shot for at least another year coming up here. He's proven that he's had, a good coaching acumen. He's been Jerry Kill's defensive coordinator for many, many years, and he filled in as an interim head coach in 2013 for 7 games when Kill took a leave of absence to manage his epilepsy. And I truly think the administration and all the coaches feel that they have a good thing going with this coaching staff. Their best recruiting class since arriving at Minnesota will come to campus next year, and I think they just want to keep going with the staff a little bit longer to see where they might take them.
Looking at more the nuts and bolts portion of this game, in my brain, one of the biggest matchups has to be Ohio State's talented defensive line against Minnesota's offensive line. If they have any chance of winning, they're going to have to control them to some degree. Joey Bosa, Adolphus Washington, just talent across the board. Is that something that you think Minnesota's offensive line can do in the run and the pass?
That's something that's going to be really interesting to watch. Minnesota had a bunch of injuries on their offensive line earlier in the season, but they really seem to have settled down with a solid rotation these last couple games. But their running game really has not been there the last couple games. They struggled to run the ball against Michigan. They struggled to run the ball against Nebraska. And really it's been their air attack that's been getting it done. So they're going to have to pass protect Mitch Leidner in order to have a chance in that game. And I think, as you guys well know, that's really hard to do against a player like Joey Bosa.
Yeah, definitely. And with Bosa and Adolphus Washington, teams have had real struggles with that. When you just touched on Mitch Leidner, that Minnesota is going to have to throw more, and they did throw for 300 yards both of the past 2 games. But last year, I saw he went 7 for 19 for 85 yards, threw 2 interceptions. He did manage to get the ball going a little bit on the ground, but. How much has he improved in the last year so that he doesn't have that performance again versus Ohio State?
I think that's kind of to be determined. You mentioned Mitch Leidner has had 2 300-yard games the past 2 weeks, but those are also the only 2 300-yard games of his career. So it's really been an interesting last couple weeks for Mitch. The 300 yards against Nebraska were against what was at the time the worst pass defense in the nation, but I I think he really surprised some people with how well he played against Michigan. So, of course, he was very fired up in that game. I don't think you'll hear a bigger Jerry Kittle defender than Mitch Leidner. But overall, the quarterback's had a very up-and-down season for Minnesota. He really has struggled on the road so far. They've only won one of their road games so far this year, and he led a game-winning, at the time, a go-ahead touchdown drive late in the fourth quarter. But overall, he's struggled on the road. So it'll be really interesting to see what he can do against this Ohio State team, because I think most people, despite him coming on hot the last 2 weeks, are still struggling what to make of Mitch Leidner.
Looking on the flip side of the ball for Minnesota and looking at Ohio State's quarterback situation, JT Barrett obviously not going to be part of this football game. The offense seemed to be really excelling with him at quarterback, becoming really a juggernaut. They've scored just time after time with JT Barrett running the read option, and now Cardale Jones takes over, and the offense hasn't looked great with Cardale Jones at quarterback. Is that something that is cause for concern, you think, for Ohio State, and something that Minnesota will be confident about going into the football game, that Cardale Jones hasn't played great to begin with?
Possibly, but of course, I don't think if you're Minnesota, you can exactly rest easy knowing that the national champion winning quarterback is now at the controls. But I do think the Gophers, have reason to be reasonably confident in their defense. JT Barrett did carve them up both on the ground and in the air last year, but overall they have a solid secondary that should be able to hang with some of these Ohio State receivers. And the real key is going to be whether their linebackers are going to be able to bring down Ezekiel Elliott in space. If Ohio State is able to get their ground game going against Minnesota's defense, I don't think there's any way they're going to be able to pull off this upset.
Yeah, that's pretty much exactly where I was headed with the next question, actually, because when I look at Ohio State with Cardale Jones, they've had the reputation sort of is different. People think of Cardale Jones as the big deep threat guy, but in reality, they've run the ball a ton more when Cardale Jones has played. They've got Ezekiel involved, Bratson Miller more involved. Minnesota's run defense, it seemed like, just looking at the numbers, they've had some good weeks, they've had some bad weeks. Are they good, or are they going to get torched by Ezekiel Elliott, who has pretty much run over everyone this season?
I would say, just as you said, they've been up, they've been down, so they're kind of in the middle. They have a couple of great stand-ups on the defensive line. Sophomore defensive tackle Steven Richardson is really going to be hard for even Ohio State to handle in the run game. Mm-hmm. But their defensive ends are always great at getting upfield, creating pressure on the quarterback, and creating tackles for loss opportunities in the backfield. The Gophers linebackers, Cody Pook, who has been a little banged up these past couple weeks, Jack Lynn and Devondre Campbell are really good tacklers, but an athlete like Ezekiel Elliott will test you like no one else they've faced this season.
Normally we like to end the show with a prediction from whoever we have on as our guest. Before we do that, I just want you to talk a little bit about what the outlook looks like for Minnesota sitting here at 4-4. They need 2 more wins to get to bowl eligibility. Obviously, losing their coach is difficult, but is that something you think they can accomplish? And then you can just give your prediction at the end of that.
I think Minnesota is very much up in the air right now at 4-4. I think that's one of the reasons the loss against Michigan was so deflating. So not only did they miss out on potentially their biggest win under this coaching staff, but now instead of at 5 wins, they're staring at 4 wins. And they have to go to number 1 Ohio State, go to number 10 Iowa, and they host the highest-ranking scoring defense in the nation in Wisconsin. So it's going to be a really big uphill battle for the Gophers to get to bowl eligibility. And you just wonder, while they're riding the crest of energy for Jerry Kittle's retirement right now, how long that's going to sustain them and whether it'll get them through the end of the year. So I think there's still going to be some resonant energy playing for Jerry this weekend against Ohio State, but I think Ohio State is just too talented for the Gophers to hang with them for 4 quarters. So in the end, my prediction is going to be 34-20. Buckeyes get the win.
All right.
Very reasonable.
Minnesota covers, though.
I do think they can cover, yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
23 points is a little bit bigger. I think they'll cover as well.
Fair enough. That's Ben Goetz. He's the sports editor for the Minnesota Daily. He's our guest today. Thank you for joining us, Ben. We do wish you the best of luck with the rest of the season.
Thank you, guys. Good luck to you as well.
Thanks. Appreciate it. Ben Goetz, he joined us from the Minnesota Daily. He's a sports editor for their student newspaper. So looking at a prediction from your side, I think that Ohio State's going to win, but what do you say?
I think Ohio State's going to win as well, but it's definitely, to me, it's not going to be the performance that we've seen with JT at quarterback. I think it'll be a lot more of a struggle because I just really haven't liked what I've seen when Cardale's been in there. And when he was in there, I thought they were going to fix it over time, but they never really did. Then they went away from him, and why do I think that them going back to them, he's going to figure it out? I don't. I'm sort of with him. I think that Ohio State will win somewhere around the realm of 31 to probably around 10. I think Minnesota will cover the spread at 23. So I think that's a little bit high, but I don't think Ohio State's going to score more than 31-ish.
I'm on the other side of the something. What is the word I'm looking for there?
I think the word you're looking for is
the
other side of the spread.
Yeah, sure. I'm on the other side of the spread. I think Ohio State's defense will not give up points to Minnesota's offense. I don't see any way where Minnesota scores, and I look at it a lot like last year.
I'm with you there, by the way.
I think that the game plan was very simplified when Cardale Jones came in at the end of last year, and it was run the ball and throw the ball on the outsides, and it worked. And I think it's going to work as they install that this week, and I think Ohio State wins big time. I think it's 49-7.
Just a quick
I think
question.
They win similar to Rutgers.
Really quick question. Why do you think that's the case, that it will work for Cardale when it hasn't really been
Because
that
I
way?
think the game plan became too complex. And it wasn't just get the ball in your playmakers' hands and let them do work, or get the playmakers up the field and say Cardale throw it deep, or give it to Ezekiel Elliott. It was more complex. He had to go through reads as opposed to just making a quick decision.
I would love to see that Cardale because he's the most entertaining quarterback in America.
Well, I think that's what's going to happen, and we will find out if that is indeed what's going to happen at 8 p.m. on ABC. That's Ohio State versus Minnesota. That will be in the shoe. We have been in the shoe. That is the show from the shoe. And we'll talk to you next week.